something else happened. And that is that Orthodox tradition is not only rationalized, it also becomes mixed with romance. The element of pagan legends entering into Orthodox lives of saints in this time made it so that there are some lives of saints which we have in our Orthodox sources. If you read the same life of a saint in a medieval Latin source, you will be completely astonished. We'll take one example, the life of Saint Christopher, which is known. Not too much is known actually about him, but his life is known. He was a soldier and he was martyred, put to tortures. And there are a number of miracles in the life. He has a staff that sprouts. This was in the tradition of Orthodox lives of saints. But there is a book written in the 13th century, the very thing which exists in English, the Golden Legend, which is a synthesis or a compilation of lives of saints, like we have daily readings of Dmitri of Rostov, lives of saints which is the same thing. Every day there is a life of a saint. The Golden Legend makes something into being fairy tales or something, not just accounts of something. In the 13th century, the height of the Middle Ages, before the Renaissance or anything, here he gives the life of Saint Christopher, which is such a one that you won't know what he's talking about. So it seems that according to this, quote, life, Saint Christopher was some kind of barbarian who decided he wanted to go in search of the most powerful king in the world in order to serve him. And he finds some kind of powerful king, who's big, as always happens, and he serves him and is very happy because he can then be a manful and valiant servant and fight for him. And then there comes a minstrel to this court. You've probably seen these people going around, troubadours and so forth. And this minstrel comes to his court and begins to sing. And he sings about the devil. He mentions the devil. And every time he mentions the devil, the king makes the sign of the cross. He seems to be some sort of Christian. And Saint Christopher is astonished. "Why did you make the sign of the cross?" he asked him. "Why did you make the sign of the cross whenever he mentioned the devil?" "Because I'm a Christian, and I'm afraid of the devil." "Afraid of the devil? That means the devil must be a more powerful king than you are. I'm going to go and serve the devil." So he goes off in search of the devil to serve the devil because he's a more powerful king. And he finally finds somebody on the road and asks him, "Who are you?" "I'm the devil." "Good. I want to serve you. You are the most powerful king in the world." So he undertakes the service of the devil, and he goes with him on his adventures to various places. And they come to a cross, and the devil all of a sudden falls back, hesitates, and runs away. And Christopher says, "Why did you run away? I thought you were the most powerful king in the world." "No, I cannot stand the cross." "Why not?" "I won't tell you." Then Christopher said, "If you won't tell me, I'll go and search for some other powerful king, because you're not so powerful." And he explained that there was someone who died on the cross, whom he's afraid of, and his name is Christ. So Christopher says, "Aha, that means there's a more powerful king yet. I will go and serve Christ." And so he goes off in search of Christ. He comes to some kind of holy man, a monk or something, and he says, "Where can I find Christ?" Well, he tells him about Christ, and he says, "Oh, I want to serve him. How do I serve him?" "Well, start fasting." Then Christopher says, "Oh, I can't fast." "Can't fast? Well, then start praying." "Oh, I can't pray." "Well, okay, you can't pray. In that case, go to a certain river and build a hut and sit in the river and wait for people to come and take them across the river. That way you will serve Christ." So he goes to the river and builds his place and sits there. And one stormy night, he hears a small voice, "Christopher, Christopher." 3 times he goes out and sees no one. And the 3rd time he goes out and sees a small child. very small child standing on the shore and saying, "Christopher, take me across the river." So he puts him on his shoulders, goes across the river, and meanwhile the river rises up higher and higher and higher, and the child becomes heavier and heavier and heavier. He finally tells the child, "I feel as though I am carrying the whole world on my shoulders." And he says, "You're carrying not only the whole world, you're carrying the creator of the world." And so then he goes off and is martyred and so forth. And you can obviously see that this is an absolute fairy tale introduced into a life of a saint. For whatever reasons we don't know, maybe there's pagan influences, the result of very good imagination. Well, anyway, this element of romance enters into even such a thing as the life of a saint, and becomes a total made-up fairy tale. And that's why you see Catholic and even some Orthodox people paint icons of Saint Christopher with the Christ child on his shoulders, because the word Christophoros means Christ-bearer. Therefore, they make a literal kind of interpretation and make up a story to suit it. And many other cases we see that in the Roman Catholic sources, even from the height of the Middle Ages in the 13th century, there are very many of these romantic elements that enter in. We cannot trust those sources. And this was the reason that later scholars came to distrust those sources as well.
Another version that's interesting too is the story of St. Christopher. If you know this story, it's one of my favorite stories. And you also see this trickery kind of turn on itself in a way that serves a higher good. So St. Christopher, in this version of the story, what you get is you get a little bit of this story from the perspective of the monster, from the perspective of the giant. St. Christopher is a giant. In some versions, he's a giant dog-headed, kind of monstrous thing. And he wants to serve the strongest man. He realizes he's just this beast. He wants to serve the king, or serve a strong king. He finds this king, starts to serve the king, and then he realizes that the king is afraid of the devil. And so he tells the king, he says, "Who's this devil figure?" Because Christopher wants to, his name is Reprobus at the beginning. He wants to serve the strongest man. So the king doesn't want to tell him. And so Christopher tricks the king. He says, "Well, if you don't tell me who the devil is, then I will leave your service." So the king is forced to reveal who the devil is to Reprobus. And of course, it's a trick, because then Reprobus leaves the king to go serve the devil. And so Reprobus goes, finds the devil, starts to serve the devil. And then one day he realizes that the devil is afraid of the cross. So he asks the devil, he says, "What is this cross? Like, what is this figure about?" And of course, the same thing happens. The devil says, "I won't tell you, because if I tell you, you'll leave my service." Reprobus plays the same trick, says, "If you don't tell me, I will leave your service." So the devil tells him about Christ, and Reprobus leaves the devil's service, has tricked the devil, which is not bad. Tricking the devil is pretty good. And then he goes to look for Christ. He can't find him, can't find Christ, can't find the strongest, can't find the greatest, the strongest emperor that has ever existed. And he meets a monk on his ways, and the monk says, "Well, I can help you find Christ if you want to find him." And he says, "Well, the way that you can find Christ is you should pray." And Reprobus is just a giant dog-headed monster. I say, "I can't pray. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen." And so, okay, the monk says, "Well, maybe you could fast. If you fasted, maybe that would help you find Christ." So Reprobus says, "Nope, I can't fast. That's not possible." And so the monk tells him to stand next to a river. So now we have the river reappearing in the story. He says, "Stand next to the river, and you can carry people across." So Christopher stands by the river, carries people across, and one day a little baby, little child, little infant comes up to him and asks him to cross him over the river. And Christopher agrees, starts to cross him, and as he's crossing him, of course, the baby becomes heavier and heavier and heavier. And Christopher is thinking, how is this possible? How can you be so heavy? And the child says, "Well, it's because I'm carrying the sins of the world." And so Christopher crosses him over the river. And in different versions, sometimes that's where he's baptized as Christopher. Sometimes he is changed back into a normal person. But what's interesting is that, it's a trick. The whole thing is a trick. The whole story is a trick, right? Again, in serving the weakest, he finds that he's actually serving the strongest in the story, right? He's looking to serve strong people, but then finally when he serves the weakest thing that you can imagine, this little baby, this little child, that he is being tricked into serving the strongest. A lot of the river crossing stories are actually baptism stories, like the story of St. Christopher, right? I hope you got the sense that Christ was baptizing St. Christopher as he's carrying him across the river.